Hello, everyone, and welcome to Side of the Desk podcast for our 6th episode. I can't believe it's 6 already. Each month, we've been chatting to influential industry leaders to explore their journey to success and, more importantly, the role recruitment played throughout it. Now, we're currently streaming live on LinkedIn and YouTube for you to watch or listen instantly. Or if you can't join us today, don't worry, I get it, life's busy, so you can watch later at your pleasure. Joining me today for episode 6 is Keneisha Williams. Keneisha is the founder of the Black in Events Network and was born and raised in the wonderful city of Toronto. She's an accomplished international event professional with over 13 years of experience, and she helps private and public organizations execute small to large scale events within the social, not-for-profit and corporate spaces. In 2020, she founded the Black in Events Network, which is a globally inclusive community to amplify and create opportunities for Black professionals working in the events industry. Now, Keneisha is no stranger to building empowering communities. She actually founded and managed the She's So Fab, which I love, and we'll talk about that later, between 2010 and 2015, which is a lifestyle company dedicated to empowering women through online content, campaigns, and social events. Now, Keneisha has been seen in Forbes and in 2021 was named the top 100 most influential people in the events industry, noted as one of the top 10 most influential women in the events industry, as well as being in Canada's top 100 Black women to watch. Well, that was amazing. So welcome, Keneisha, to Side of the Desk. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Oh my gosh, like Robert, that reel that y'all put together in the beginning, wow, I might need you to do my reel for me. Where'd you get those videos?
I cannot take any credit. That's all Naomi Rose, who's in the background doing all of this. No,
awesome.
Yeah, no, she's fantastic. I watched it and was like, that is amazing.
Amazing. Thank you so much, though, for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you ever so much. I believe it's 6 a.m. in the morning where you are, so fair play.
It is.
Thank you so much. So listen, before we get started, we are live, everyone, which means you can share your comments and your thoughts in the comments box if you want to, and we'd love you to. We'd love it to be interactive. Just introduce us, yourself, let us know where you are in the world, and yeah, we'll try and pop them in as well. Well, no, we will pop them in. So let's get started with things. Now, I always ask all my guests this. Everyone seems to have a different story for how they got into the sector. I'm really keen to understand yours, Keneisha. How did you get into the event sector that you're in?
This is always a really fun story because I always say to people, where do you want me to start? Do you want to start when I was in grade 5 or do you want me to start when I was an adult? I think events is one of those things that has always kind of ran through my blood in this weird, strange way. I tried to execute my first festival when I was in grade 5 in my neighborhood in our park that was, in our neighborhood. But to be honest with you, once I hit my 20s, I did events a lot throughout high school, especially on our student council. But, once I, became an adult, I started doing a lot of social events, socially related events. And I was like, oh, I like this stuff. I want to get a little bit more in depth and see where I could go with this. And, it was one of those things, you had the opportunity to be creative. At the time, I didn't think you'd have to sit at your desk too much, but that was a lie. So, as I started to really get into the idea of, okay, I want to get into this, I said, let me go back to school. And, I had already studied and, did communications and marketing. And then I thought, and I said, I don't know if I want to do a job where I'm sitting at my desk all day. And I went back to do event management. And then I quickly went into the corporate space of events, to be honest with you. And, that's rare. I got to really kind of get my feet wet with, what the experience was like. And then I did learn that you do sit at your desk about 90% of the time. And it's fine. the other side of it is, you get to still be creative. It was such a learning journey. So yeah, I've had the opportunity to, I would say, do a lot of different streams of events. Like there's the corporate, there's the not-for-profit, there's the social, that type of fun stuff. So not the cliche, like the birthday party is the only thing I've done for birthday parties for my son, and I'm just over that. I would just, but yeah, that's part of the story there.
So just for my time, look, it's really interesting. In the UK, I'd say at least half of the industry fell into events. It's not until the pandemic hit, not a lot of people even knew we had this like 90 billion industry. Grade 5, just so I know, what age is grade 5 over there?
I'm going grade 5. You're around 9, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
So that's quite. So you the events industry was something early on for you. Is there a, what's it seen like in Canada? Does the event sector have maybe more of a sort of profile then? It's quite unusual to be. I know 5. Obviously, you probably. It wasn't like
that was just me wanting to do something for my neighborhood, but no, events, I think just like the UK in the respect, it's like, you might leave school, maybe you fall into it, maybe you're in a job where there's some people, a lot of us do fall into events, and I've met plenty of people who they're like, yeah, I just started doing this. I don't know. I was trying to do something else, and here I am, right? And I love it. That's the thing. You have to love this. If you don't love it, like, you're not going to do it, So like a lot of people, maybe when you leave school, you get a job and your employer asks you to pull off like a team meeting, and then it goes from a retreat, and then it goes to the conference, and then it goes from there, and then you're like, what am I doing? So I think a lot of people do fall into it because there's so many people you meet, and they're like, there's industry events, you can get credentials for this. Like, it's amazing how many people in our industry don't know that there's so many opportunities to grow within the industry. And like you said, it's just one of those things. A lot of us, people fall into it.
And is that a profile thing in Canada then? Is it something that you recognize quite early, or do you think it's still quite an industry that's not really got the razzmatazz of all the other stuff that people try and send you to at uni? You mentioned comms and things like that was sort of highlighted there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't have like any facts and figures, and I think I'm going to base this on assumption. When you have like things like,
we make up stats all the time. Just go for it. It's fine.
Yeah. When I was younger and you go to career shows and stuff like that, this is not one of those industries that people are, advertising about, right? Yeah. Oh, come do events with me. So, probably not, because when I was in university, I didn't even think that this was a career. I didn't know of it to be a career, to be honest with you. You're thinking, okay, I'm going to leave school, I'm going to be like this big time marketer. And those are the thoughts. You're never thinking I'm going to do events, right? So I don't think it's profiled as heavily. I think maybe now it's becoming something with things like social media where, and a lot of, I'm going to say this very lightly and mince my words. A lot of event professionals, especially in the corporate space, they're very sensitive about being profiled as a party planner, right?
Ooh,
yeah. So if you look on like social media, Instagram, TikTok, you're going to see a lot of people who do parties, and they're doing all the pretty stuff and like the decor, and they're showing all that stuff. And I think that is maybe what has created events to be so popularized right now. I've never really seen people on Instagram showing like a conference and being like, whoa, look at the glitz and glam of my conference. But I think it is definitely, being popularized in that respect now. But yeah, you're right. And during the pandemic, we did get some shine, and a lot of conversation has been stirred. I think even myself, you kind of felt like you were in silos, and then the pandemic happened and we were all online, and that's because we were so busy before, but we were all online just having conversations and seeing like, oh, there's people out in the UK doing this too. And there's people, so we all became a community. And like we were talking before this, Robert, we kind of felt like we all knew each other almost, because we understood where we were all coming from, and we built a bit of a community within the industry.
It's such a great, I love that word community. It's interesting what you said, because we have that here. And before I was doing this, I was in the events myself, and there was always such a sort of a clique, if you imagine, between sort of corporate creative thinks that corporate work 9 to 5 and all they care about, and corporates think creatives just burn through money. And then I think the sort of pandemic, if we can take some positives from it, suddenly we all came together and we were sort of talking about, I mean, even me as a recruiter, we're classed as like the lowest common denominator, unfortunately. And mostly, they deserve that title. But even like doing it online, suddenly you sort of saw, I've seen you before, online, but suddenly you sort of felt like, oh, I know Keneisha. I've never met you, but it's like, I know these people now. And I've really valued that, I think. And also, without getting too deep, helped me through some really dark times during the pandemic,
Agree. Same. I feel the same.
No, good. We talked about you started doing this since you were 5, and you said you got into it when you were 20. So I'm assuming that was last week.
I wish.
So what is it that keeps you in it then? What is it keeps that sort of passion? What is it gets you up at 6 a.m. apart from the gym? what keeps you going? What keeps you in the industry?
That's a great question. You know what? It's a combination of things. I think there's that first thing is the adrenaline rush of what events give you, and until you wake up at 5 a.m. to get to your venue at 6 or whatever the story is, there's this adrenaline rush that you get when you are executing an event on the day of, right? I also think it's just the idea of, problems arising and figuring out how to out those problems that happen as they go. So, there's that problem solver element to it. And also just being able to, work with different people. Like, I think one thing that I love is the opportunity that events give you, right? The opportunity I've been really fortunate in my career to work with some really amazing companies and teams and travel, right? And, when your career can give you those opportunities, it's something that you really appreciate. So events has given me the opportunity to do so many different things, work on so many different projects, meet so many different people, and, form relationships. So I think I love that element of it. And, it's one of those things we all get it. It's one of those things we have we understand, like, when you talk about events to your family, they're like, what do you do again? And, oh, you do parties. And, not everyone understands the language of us. So, there's this bond, I guess. So yeah, that's really what has, kept me and just there's so much revolution to events. It's always evolving. Things are changing rapidly. So it's exciting.
And what are the sort of main, I know obviously a little bit of background and we'll get onto that in a second, but what are the main sort of event types? Do you focus specifically in an area? Do you do anything? Like what are the sort of core work that you sort of get involved in these days?
Yeah, a lot of the events have been corporate focused, conferences, meetings. I've done quite a few trade shows. So, that's the area I appreciate a little bit more than others. I've done not-for-profit. I'm not a big fan. I think I just like working with bigger budgets. So that's I think those are my core areas.
Okay. So we talked about what's keeping you in it, and obviously we'll come on to EDI now, or DEI. I'm not sure what the word is in Canada, the acronym in Canada. But what was it that inspired you to start the Black in Events Network then? How did that sort of come about, and what were your sort of ideas around what impact that could make?
Yeah, no, definitely. So very early on, before the pandemic before we even got sent home, there's a conversation online about, can't remember the details, but it was just really about communities and, you know, making space for everybody. And at the time, Ashanti, who's actually based in the UK, we kind of got together and thought maybe it would be a great idea to create a space where, you know, Black professionals could be more represented, because, you know, out here in Canada, as far as I know at the time, you know, there wasn't that much talk. And being a professional in the industry, not really understanding all the resources at my fingertips, you can feel kind of alone, so to speak. There wasn't a lot of sourcing out to see, you know, from, you know, the other side, I guess, of the events industry. It didn't seem like there was this sourcing out of, okay, you know, we want you to be part of this community, et cetera, right? So, you know, we thought, you know, maybe we create a space. And, you know, the idea behind that was just really building some type of community for that. So, you know, as time progressed, the pandemic happened after that. And then, you know, we were at home, you know, and then after there's, you know, the murder of George Floyd in the US, and that became a dialogue in the events industry. So we started to realize that there were more voices that were coming out that were talking about the lack of representation in events. And we thought, wow, okay, I guess we're not really alone in this. And at one point we kind of felt like that, which is kind of weird. But to hear so many voices like in the UK, in Canada, in the US talking about this, it's like, okay, so there is something happening and we should be addressing it, right? So started from there. Ashanti got super busy in a lot of other projects, which she's super successful at right now. So shout out to Ashanti. But she decided, you know what, she's gonna part ways with Black in Events. And then I decided, okay, well, you know, I'm gonna, you know, make this decision to, you wanna run with it? And I did. And I thought, you know what, I've always had this passion for helping people. It doesn't matter who you are, and, you know, building community. I think it's something weirdly in my blood. I just always end up doing these things. And, you know, I said, why not? Like, you know, I think this, you know, and I don't want to take away from other organizations that have been doing this. Like, you have the National Coalition of Black media professionals. They've been in this game for like 40 years now, right? I think being me, a Black woman in Canada, I thought it would be great to have Black Events Network be representative of, you know, those of us that are also here. But luckily, we have also a global footprint. We have people in the UK, we've got people in the US, we've got people in Dubai, we've got people in Africa. So, you know, creating that space is really, you know, important, and just creating a funnel of opportunities to people who don't really necessarily feel seen in the industry and want more opportunities.
And I think, I mean, it's wonderful. And I think it's really interesting how, I think, you know, EDI is always, it's one of those situations where everyone's known it's not right. We're talking specifically, you know, the events industry globally, but I think a lot of it has come from people not knowing. And I'm talking about, you know, people like myself, white people, especially middle-aged, middle-class white people, you know, that side of it. If you look at our industry, you know, it's predominantly female. You know, this is UK. I think it's 70 to 80% female in the UK, although only 20% are in senior leadership roles, which is awful. And I think we've got I don't know how to say it, you've got an audience there ready to be mobilized. So there's lots of things around, you know, female entrepreneurs, female mentoring. I think when you look at an industry that is between 80 and 90% white,
yeah,
you know, it's difficult. And I've, you know, and it's only probably been during the pandemic that even my own network has become more diverse as I've started to feel confident in it. And I think that was a thing as a white man as well.
Yeah.
It's feeling confident to talk about it, but actually understanding why. Because I speak to people, you know, it's why I set up the Reach Scholarship that we mentioned the other time.
Right.
You know, I speak to heads of HR, global people, you know, talking about how inclusivity is really important. And my question is, you know, we want to look at diversifying our workforce. And I always say, why? I always ask them why, because I want to know, you know, and unfortunately, a lot of the time it's like, well, we should, or, I mean, I won't go into detail. That's some of the things I've heard. You're like, listen, you're so, and it's interesting because it's for me, and it was Gabby, Gabrielle Austin Brown.
Yes.
We set up Reach together, and she's an absolute hero of mine. It was understanding that side of things and then speaking in the right areas and realizing that my network at the time is people that's, are my network. They're not as diverse as they are now. And I think we are seeing that move, but, places like yourself, I saw something the other day. Have you heard of a company called Eric? I don't know if you've heard of them in Canada.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, I was at a talk for EvCom, and a lady called May Yip, and I can't remember her friend's name. They set up Eric, which is specifically around young, underrepresented minorities into the creative space. And all they do is try and recruit, like the initial talent. And I was like, I don't know anything about this. I've been in this industry for 15, 20 years. I don't know anything about this. So I think like, Black in Events, it's not about, and there are a lot of people, as Keneisha, that are like, oh, well, why do we have to do, there is still that sort of pushback.
Totally.
But I do see a genuine sort of like step change from we want to talk about EDI as a tick box on a CSR, oh, aren't we good at EDI, to actually it is important. And I think that's where I learned the difference between equity and equality. That for me was a big flip. And I mean, when you're working with Black Events, do you still see clients wanting companies wanting to become more diverse because they feel it's right, or are you seeing maybe still a bit of, okay, we should really do something about, what are you seeing?
Yeah, and this is you hit on a lot of important points there, and honestly, I'll give you, Robert, your flowers for recognizing, things in your own network and kind of making that change or being open to that change, because not a lot of people can say that, right? I think really, we talk to partners, we talk to potential partners a lot, and some. And there are people who just organically reach out and say, how can our company support? I think the challenge, like you mentioned, is, getting through the why, and being dedicated to what that looks like. I think a lot of companies, from just experience, and I'm not a experienced DEI practitioner in any way, right? You have your Gabbies who's like amazing at that, right? But from just talking with potential partners, I think it's the idea that it sounds great. And then when you speak to potential partners and then they see, maybe what the space that they need to create in their company, the dedication, the time, commitment, that's where they sort of start to scale back. I cannot tell you how many companies have ever reached out to me, and then we have a conversation, so come back. And I think it's because, I'm being so honest, I think it's because of, there's a commitment, right? If I say to you, we have people in our community that are looking for jobs, and we're looking at ways to partner and talk about it, and the conversation seems great, but I think there's that, okay, well, I need to talk to, and here's the thing, and maybe this is where the issue is, a lot of people that reach out are not, decision makers. So that can play a big role, and maybe even in this conversation, maybe I should be like, well, you need to bring your decision maker into the conversation before we talk. But a lot of folks, they have to go back to their decision makers, and maybe it's not wanting to implement that budget and dedication and time. So there's so many reasons that could be happening, but I do think the commitment sometimes is a little bit overwhelming. But like you said, it takes the why, it takes education to learn. And one point that you made earlier is, people might look at Black and it's like, why do we need it? Well, we do. And it's just because we need to create a space where there's people who, feel, being somebody in the events industry, leading this, it's funneling the information that is not marketed to a lot of folks in our communities, that's not directed to our communities. There's a lot of panels, there's a lot of events going on in the industry. A lot of the panels, they don't look like a lot of us. Sometimes it's crazy. You said like there's in the UK 90% women, and sometimes you look at those panels, they're men, white men, right? So it's like, what are we?
70% women, 90% white.
90% white, right? So why are we? How come our demographics in those panels aren't looking like the representation of who we are? We plan events. That means we are exposed to just the world at large, creative ideas. So we should be showing that in the education that we're showing to people. So there's a lot of people, they may see industry events, but they're like, oh, that's not for me, because, you know, like you said earlier, you kind of associate with what you know, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, we have some work to do, but, you know, it's getting the conversation out there and keep advocating, and we'll get there. It'll happen.
I think you're right, and I love the word commitment. You know, as you know, I'm a senior recruiter, I recruit senior event professionals, and I do get clients saying, you know, look, we are looking to diversify, we are looking to be a more inclusive organization, and I always push back and say, well, that's not, I can't do that for you. You know, if I look at your website and all your board is white, or all your board is men, or all your meet the team, or there's nothing inclusive about your language, you know, great, you know, it's all very well. We could hire a black person, underrepresented minority, but if your organization is actually not an inclusive, what's the point? You know,
what's going to happen? What's going to happen to that person in that organization?
And the decision makers. I mean, I wrote a column recently. I do a monthly column in Conference News, and I remembered a story. I won't say the agency, but they're a global agency, and I joined, and I was given, you know, the starter pack, you know, all the stuff, and you read through it. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, another guy joined who was a black guy, and he said something to me. He sort of said, "Oh, you know, what did you?" I said, "Oh, it's great." And he said, "Oh, did you see the EDI policy?" And I was like, "No." So what they'd done is they hadn't given me the EDI policy; they'd given it to the black guy.
Oh my gosh!
You know, it's great that they've got one, but you know, and I think that's one of the key things about speaking with you. And I'm very conscious of, you know, panels where black or Asian people or underrepresented minorities are invited to talk about being black or underrepresented minorities. Like, you know, I'm an event professional, you know, that's what I should be here for. And, you know, we're talking about it now because, you know, Black in Events Network is, but it's also, I'm very conscious whenever I speak to people that, you know, you're an event professional to me, you know, it's, and I was one of those people though, until Gabby told me off quite right. I used to be one of those, I don't see color sort of thing, you know, and Gabby was like, well, you do, you know, you should more on, you know. I was like, no, you're absolutely
y'all
right.
do. Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful. Okay, so let me just pull that. Sorry, I seem to have lost that. So, talking about careers, there we got into talk about recruitment for you. Like, what's your what's your personal experience of recruitment? You know, either being recruited or recruiting yourself. How do you think recruitment, especially in the Canadian market, how is it seen in the industry? How is it approached?
Recruiting, that's a good question. I think, you know, it's one of those processes where, you know, I guess a lot of assumption. You know, I've been to, you know, recruited for jobs, and, you know, it's not until the pandemic and you've done a lot of reflection. I did a lot of reflection during the pandemic when, you know, things broke out, and I realized, well, maybe there was something skewed in that process and whatnot. But, you know, these things were so, you didn't really think of it as much prior as you should have. But, you know, recruiting process in Canada, I think it's, you know, twofold. There's times where a lot of the times it's, you know, for whatever reason you get overlooked. But I've had interviews. A lot of my interviews in my career have been panel interviews, believe it or not. Not a lot of people get that. I don't know why. I think I've been fortunate enough to go through processes where I reach these, you know, panels, and I'm talking to a lot of people, and then, you know, you go through like 4 or 5 processes, and then you don't get the job. You know, kind of tedious. I think a lot of folks should work on being a little bit more creative in how they, you know, recruit people and what they're looking for, you know, and be more open to, you know, different types of, you know, educational levels, and not be so linear, you know, especially when you're looking at folks' resume that says nothing. I'm at this point in my career journey where I always say to people, I don't do cover letters. Like if my LinkedIn and my resume doesn't impress you, then I don't know what to tell you at this point, because I'm not sitting and writing an essay to anybody. I did that in university. I'm not doing that. But yeah, I think the recruiting journey, you know, there's a lot, there's always work to be done in any industry. I think it's, you know, being, you know, looking at what the generation is now, and, you know, being open to making changes in how you recruit people, you know, using different creative strategies. We're in a generation where we're, you know, I look at my son, he's 15, and I think about when they're going, like in the next 15 years, you know, are they going to be keen on, you know, the regular process of recruitment? I don't think so. I think recruiters are going to have to do, they have a little bit more tough work to do to get these kids their attention. Otherwise, they're going to go make money on YouTube or TikTok that recruiters companies can't pay them.
I've got an 8-year-old who wants to be a YouTuber, and I'm sat there like, these people open stuff on YouTube, and that is their job. That is, and he's like, yeah, they earn millions. I'm like, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, it's a beast, right? So, you know, we got to think of these ways to just, you know, get more people interested in what we're doing, and change things, because things are changing. And if we don't adapt to this younger generation that's coming up right now, we might have a lot of empty seats in our offices.
And is that how most of your recruitment career has gone, sort of interviewing and applying, or has it been a sort of a mix of that? Or
Yeah, a lot of the time it's, you know, very generic. You know, I see a job, I apply for it, and you know, do a couple interviews and get the gig. One thing that I've always done in my career is, you know, these are the jobs that I actually get the call back, is follow up. So, you know, make follow-ups with my recruiter, you know, have conversation with them and kind of build a relationship with them. Yeah. You know, I've had a lot of contract work jobs, and the people that I'm recruited by, I, you know, email them, talk to them, and I think that just builds like a good repertoire, and they're more open to, you know, like it, you know, putting you in front of a potential employer.
So with all the jobs or projects work you've done, what would you say is like, what's been your best job? What's been your worst job during your career?
Oh, okay. Well, let's start with the best one. So, you know, this was recent. I was working with the Bank of Montreal, and this was on the employee-facing side. So, you know, when I tell people the bank, they're like, "Oh, you were a teller? You were doing?" I was like, "No, I wasn't doing anything for any of the tellers. It was really the back end, the technology side of the bank, and, you know, kind of bringing them up to speed on, you know, new technologies that they're implementing in the bank." So we had a lot of employee facing, you know, conferences and meetings. You know, we did roadshows between Canada and the US, which was really exciting. That was one of the best because we had a very supportive team. Yeah. So I think this is where I was kind of spoiled, in the sense where, you know, the team was huge. So we had people doing the communications, and then the marketing side of things, and the design, and, you know, you're kind of breathing a little bit because you have like more of the logistics. Not breathing necessarily when you're having like 1,000 people at a conference, but you know what I mean. So, you know, I think that was one of the best experiences. The team was super, super diverse, not only on our team, but just within the bank, the company. And I know that I guess I'm promoting BMO in a weird way, but, you know, they have this just a great repertoire for being super diverse at their company. So, you know, I think that's one thing that made it great. You know, there's people of all walks of life, and, you know, I always appreciate jobs like that. So it was great, and, you know, very supportive team, supportive of your growth. And those are the things that help you in your career, because, you know, as event professionals, we think we can do everything, and we wear so many hats, and it can become very stressful. And because we have that "I can do anything" mentality, you tend to, not think you need all the help you need, and you do, right? So, that was one of the best jobs, and I learned a lot, and I grew tremendously there. There's another job that I worked at. I'm not going to name the name.
No, God, don't name the names.
Just before the pandemic, and it's one of those things where, and maybe we can talk about this, the recruiting, saying one thing, like really shining up that letter of acceptance and shining up, just the job description. And I'm not even going to lie to you. When I think about it, I actually feel this, I just like, the job just wasn't what they said it was. The expectations changed while you were there. And, I just found that the culture of like respecting boundaries was not there. And that's something that, when you're coming from you're coming from companies that respect your boundaries, that can be very shattering. Saying that there's a team meeting at 4:00 and then the person that's putting on the meeting is like 20 minutes late and expecting everybody to wait at the end of the day. Those things that really, scarred me a bit. So, yeah, because, when you work in a job and, especially when you do events and stuff, right? It's already super stressful. Mm-hmm. And then when you work in an environment that doesn't respect your boundaries and, doesn't hold to, being accountable and what they said this job was going to be, those things can be kind of a sour experience, right?
So as well, that's the thing for me with recruitment. People forget it's people driven, and the problem you get with recruiters, either external or hiring teams, is they're working to metrics. They have to fill that gap. Because we all know that every job you do, it's not always going to be great. It's called work because you get paid for it. You wouldn't do it for free. But I think there is that thing that people give these unrealistic expectations because they sort of, my job is done, you are now placed, and they forget that you're a human being with your own things going on. So it's a real problem, both recruitment and hiring teams.
And can I say something, Robert? I think this is for a lot of people. When you get a job, if you like it or not, like right away. And this was one of those jobs when I attended there the first day, I was like, this is not happening. This is just not it.
You weren't getting that vibe in the interview or anything?
No, not at all. At all. Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. So, when you go on the first day and you're like, okay, yeah, this is not going to work. And ironically, like in a couple months, the pandemic happened. It's like,
it's so interesting hearing that about interviews from your side, because interviews are, they're the bane of, because if you think about clients, they're not professional interviewers, and you're not a professional interviewee. You're an event professional, and I've seen people exactly like that. The client is going to sell themselves to you, and then you go in, it's not real. I've also seen it the other way, and I use myself as an example. I was the global development director at Bank Sadler. I'm quite happy to say the name of it. I did one of the best interviews ever. I walked out of there thinking I've nailed that. And no way should I have been given that job. It was so far above. It was so and they hadn't told me a lot of stuff about that. And I remember, like you said, about a month or two in, I was thinking, I've made a massive mistake.
It happens.
But and I get that feedback. People say, "Oh, they weren't very dynamic," and I'm like, "What do you want them to do? Come in with balloons and what?" They're being interviewed. It shouldn't be about. An interview should, for me, be about 20% of like us having a chat now. But like you said, if you've got a panel of people, say 5 people, only one of them you're probably going to have is either your line manager, and maybe the other one is going to be someone you have day-to-day contact. The rest of them you're never going to see again.
Exactly.
It's you're right about things changing. I do say, and talking about things changing, look at that segue right into it. With we talked about the longevity career, talked about where you are, and obviously lots to go. But where would you say now? What if I gave you that magic wand and said, right, you can change one thing about the industry? What would you sort of say? This is what I think needs to change in the industry.
Can I talk about it from a recruitment standpoint? Maybe
Whatever.
yeah. And this just kind of came to me when we were having this conversation, Robert, is I've noticed that there's a lot of companies because and I don't know about other industries, but as an event professional, a lot of companies ask you to create a proposal for an event. And I always feel kind of gypped in those situations because I'm like, if they don't hire me, are they going to take my ideas and create their own event with it? So, you know, I'm going to say that from a recruitment standpoint, it's like, what your ask of potential employees is, maybe kind of scale back, because that can be intimidating and a bigger turnoff, because folks don't want to just, you're looking for a job because you're out of a job. So that's like added stress to the stress of it already. But in the industry itself, in terms of just day to day and how we function, I think it's just really working to be inclusive. I think we need to still keep that story alive and not treat it as a trend. I really kind of get agitated a little bit when I see that on like the yearly trend reports that come out from almost all top publications. But it's like, why is DEI a trend? Why is it not something that we're just automatically understanding that we should be implementing? And I get it. We have to talk about the conversation, but maybe that's because we're not talking about it enough throughout the year. So we have to highlight it, at the top of the year. I don't know. But I think we need to move from the conversation to more action. And yes, it's fine to talk about it on, event panels and stuff, but what are you doing that is showing that? So who's working this event? Like, who's putting this event on? Whose advice are you getting? And from a holistic view, there's so many threads when it comes to DEI. Yes, there's Black professionals, but there's other things under that umbrella, right? Accessibility, like what are we doing with accessibility? How are we addressing these things? So I want to see more. I want to see, as professionals in this industry, we cater to the general public, like, companies and stuff. Why are we struggling to do these things within our industry is still a question to me. And I don't want to take away from the fact that we're not doing anything. We are. I sit on the EIC task force, and we are, doing some work there. But I think just there needs to be more flow of that, and not forgetting that we need to be holistic and be more inclusive of everyone that we work with.
It's such a good point, and I think something that I've never thought of that about it. Putting it in trends. You're right. It sort of makes it as if it's a sort of hot topic. But if we think we've got a problem now, if we're not committing, using your word about commitment, if we're not committing to making the whole industry more inclusive, and we don't just talk about race, as you rightly mentioned, then inclusive as a whole. People like you mentioned, your 15-year-old son. We're not going to get the next pipeline, the next generation of event professionals, let alone, from an underrepresented minority. We won't get the next generation of event professionals from any walk of life if we're sort of seen as stagnating and doing the same sort of thing. It's such a good point, and something that I think we all wish we could go. Well, we talked before, like if you took where we are now, if you could say go back 5 years and speak to yourself 5 years ago, what would you say to yourself 5 years ago? What would you sort of talk would you give to yourself?
I love that question. You know what? I ask myself this question at least once a year, especially when that birthday comes around. Very reflective, and I am an overthinker. So one thing, I second guess myself a lot. That's the human in me, I guess. And I think it's really to tell yourself to keep going and trust the journey of where you are right now, and stay true to who you are, because who you are as a person and tapping into, what means a lot to you, that purpose, it will always find you. It will always find you. And so I would really tell myself to just trust that process. Don't worry too much and enjoy that journey, because, your purpose always finds you. And like I said earlier, when it comes to building communities, I can't tell you how long this has come up in my life all the time. And here I am. So I was like, I can't outrun this thing.
That's wonderful. I love that. Your purpose will always find you. I'm going to print that off. Okay, so we're getting towards the end. So just to sort of finally wrap things up, what's next for you then, Keneisha? Personally, professionally, what projects you got coming out? Anything you can tell us about, or you want to share? Sorry.
Yeah. So you know what? Just really, continuing my advocacy, and really focusing on that. I really want to focus on helping people. And it's not just, helping Black professionals in the community, but also helping people who don't understand what I'm doing and, be that common denominator of getting people to see that work and, building on that. It's a beautiful thing, to be honest with you, just bridging people together. I take a lot of pride in that. And so, I'm going to continue this work. May not do as much events. I'm getting at that age where I'm like, oh my God, this is tiring. So I don't know how much more I have in me, to be honest with you. So, we'll see. Do things here and there, but, focus more on advocacy and supporting the industry. I'm one of those people. I'm a millennial. So when we started working, they always said to us, you guys are going to change jobs like every 3 years. And I thought, okay, sure. And I've changed, like my mind frame sometimes, but, I don't think I know that I want to stay in the events industry for sure and just advocate and make some change and ruffle some feathers at the same time and just have fun doing it. I'm at that phase of my life where I take one day at a time. So you never know. And I don't like to make too many plans, just, see where things go.
And obviously, final question for you. You can obviously see, we all can see how successful you've been, and not just the community you've built, but you're definitely seen as for me, like that sort of ray of light that makes me think, do you know what? If there's people like you out there, then things will change. What advice can you give anyone, whatever background, whoever, whatever the industry coming into it? What if someone's out there now seeing you thinking that's a career for me? What advice can you give people looking to come into this sector?
Ooh, be open. Be open to change and know that there's so many threads to events that you could possibly get into. It's not just the planning. There's so many ecosystems in events that you could do. So, be open to that. It takes some time to figure out what's your thing, and do different things. Don't just do the corporate stuff. Try something else and see if that's for you. And before you know it, you'll find your space. But don't put yourself in a box. Take risks in this space and go for it. There's so much to explore. I think that's the beauty about the events industry. There's so many things that you could possibly do. So keep your mind open. Take risks.
Take risks.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Keneisha, I can't believe that's gone so quickly.
I know, the sun is out now.
You might need to go back to bed now, but listen,
no.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for that. I personally really enjoyed getting to know your story, and I think your journey into the events industry and what you've shared, I think will really help people that are listening and are going to watch later. I think the sort of deeper insight, your love for the industry has come across, the work you're doing. Absolutely, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Well,
as a reminder to everyone, we're currently streaming live. You can watch this later. If it's going to be available for eternity, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. You can stay updated for the next episode. Visit my LinkedIn profile, register to receive notifications. Please go and follow Keneisha on LinkedIn. Go and not just follow, but join in. You talked about community. Join in, engage, help spread the message, be part of the message. And thanks to our audience for joining us live. Keneisha, any final comments from you?
Just thank you, Robert. You've been a ray of sunshine. So thank you so much, Naomi. It's been a pleasure. This has been actually one of my most exciting, this was a fun interview. Very well. Yeah, I loved it. The energy was amazing. So thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it a lot.
You're more than welcome. Thank you ever so much. And that is a wrap for episode 6. Just remember, everyone, there's enough BS in the world already. Please treat recruitment as a strategy and don't dump it on the side of the desk. Thanks.